Chapter 39. Her Rise. The glass of the floor-to-ceiling windows in the CEO suite of the Blackwood. No, the Sterling Tower felt different today. It didn't feel like the walls of a cage. It felt like the boundaries of a kingdom I had finally conquered. I stood there, looking out at the morning sun hitting the spire of the Empire State Building. I was wearing a suit of ivory wool, the shoulders sharp, the waist tailored with mathematical precision. My hair was pulled back into a sleek, low ponytail held by a simple gold clip. No more messy knots, no more hiding behind laboratory goggles. I looked at the desk. The massive slab of obsidian was gone. In its place was a table made of reclaimed oak, warm, organic, and rooted in the earth. On top of it sat a single, silver nameplate, Maya Sterling, Chief Executive Officer. My heart did a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. A month ago, I had walked into this building with a consignment shop dress and a prayer. I had been willing to sign away my soul to save my father. Today, my father was sitting in a sunny room in the Hamptons, his mind clear, his body healing. And I was the one holding the keys to the most powerful tech conglomerate in the world. The door to the office opened. I didn't have to look to know who it was. The air in the room changed, vibrating with a familiar magnetic heat. "The board is assembled," Alexander said. I turned. He was leaning against the doorframe, looking more relaxed than I had ever seen him. He wasn't wearing a tie. His charcoal blazer was unbuttoned and his hands were tucked into his pockets. He had traded the Titan mask for the consultant look, but the power he radiated hadn't dimmed, it had simply shifted. It was no longer a weapon he used to dominate the room, it was a shield he used to protect me. "Are you ready to own them, Maya?" he asked, his gray eyes searching mine. "I don't want to own them, Alexander," I said, walking toward him. "I want to lead them. There's a difference." He smiled, a real, genuine smile that made my knees feel like water. "Spoken like a true Sterling, but don't be too gentle. They still smell the Blackwood blood on the carpet, and they're looking for a reason to bite." I stopped in front of him, reaching up to straighten his collar, even though it was already perfect. "Let them bite. I've already updated the security protocols, biometric and psychological." Alexander's hand came up, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw before lingering on the ring on my finger. "You look magnificent. You look like a revolution." "I feel like one," I whispered. He leaned down and kissed me, a brief, grounding touch that tasted of the future. "I'll be at the back of the room. I won't say a word. Today, the world only hears you." Alexander POV. Walking into that boardroom as a special consultant was the most satisfying moment of my career. I followed Maya as she entered the room. The transition in the atmosphere was instantaneous. For years, I had walked into this room and felt the collective breath of the board hitch in fear. Today, the air was thick with something else: uncertainty, skepticism, and a desperate, crawling curiosity. Maya didn't go to the head of the table. Not yet. She walked to the window and stood there for a moment, letting the silence build. She let them look at her. She let them see the woman who had survived the locked-in contract and the Zurich fire. Henderson was there, sitting in the corner, his face a mask of bitter resentment. He had survived the purge only because he held a legacy seat, but he was toothless now. Beside him were the new appointments, men and women I had helped Maya handpick from the ethics and research sectors. Maya finally turned. She didn't sit down. She leaned against the edge of the table, her posture relaxed but commanding. "Gentlemen, ladies," she began, her voice a clear, melodic bell in the stillness. "For 30 years, this room has been governed by a single word: acquisition. You were taught that the only way to grow was to take, to lock in assets, to secure the room. She looked directly at Henderson, her eyes like shards of amber glass. That era is over. Effective immediately, the Blackwood Sterling Group is being restructured as the Sterling Blackwood Foundation. We are transitioning from a venture capital model to a research and delivery model. Our primary asset is no longer the stock price. It is the integrity of the human mind. A murmur of protest went around the table. Henderson cleared his throat, his voice shaky. "Miss Sterling, CEO Sterling, surely you realize that we have fiduciary duties to the shareholders. We can't just turn a global empire into a nonprofit charity." "I didn't say it was a charity, Mr. Henderson," Maya countered, her voice dropping to a dangerous, low register that sounded remarkably like mine used to. "I said we are prioritizing integrity. The Horizon Project has already received pre-orders from 18 different governments. Our valuation has tripled since the Zurich summit. People aren't buying the Blackwood name anymore. They're buying the sterling truth." She stepped forward, placing a thick folder on the table. "Here are the new terms. Every board member will be required to sign a new ethics mandate. No more shell companies. No more locked-in clauses. If you don't like the new direction, your exit packages are on page 12. They are generous, but they are final. You have until the end of this meeting to decide if you're a partner or a ghost." I stayed in the shadows at the back of the room, my arms crossed, a slow, dark pride blooming in my chest. She was magnificent. She wasn't just managing the board. She was dismantling the very concept of the Titan and replacing it with something far more sustainable. She was rising. And as I watched her handle Henderson's pathetic attempts at pushback with the grace of a master fencer, I realized that I had never been more attracted to her. The intellectual dominance, the raw, unshielded authority, it was an aphrodisiac more potent than any wine. The meeting lasted 2 hours. By the end, 3 members had walked out, the rest had signed. The Sterling rise was official. Maya POV. The office was quiet again. The board had scrambled away to process the earthquake I had just triggered. I sat in my new oak chair, the weight of the moment finally settling into my bones. I had done it. I had reclaimed my father's name and reshaped the monster that had tried to consume us. "You were a bit soft on page 12. Alexander's voice came from the doorway. I looked up. He was walking toward me, a bottle of vintage champagne in one hand and 2 glasses in the other. He set them on the desk and began to work the cork. "Soft. I gave them the most restrictive non-compete in the history of the SEC, I said, a smile tugging at my lips. "You gave them a way out with their dignity intact," Alexander said, the cork popping with a soft thud. "I would have buried them in litigation until their grandchildren were broke. But I suppose that's why you're the CEO and I'm just the guy who knows where the good wine is." He poured the champagne and handed me a glass. "To the Queen of New York." "To the partner," I corrected, clinking my glass against his. We drank in silence for a moment, the golden light of the afternoon filling the room. Alexander didn't go back to his chair. He walked around the desk and stood behind me, his hands resting on my shoulders. His touch was heavy, warm, and grounding. "What are you thinking about?" He whispered, his lips grazing the top of my head. "I'm thinking about the first night I came here," I admitted. "The ballroom. The way you looked at me like I was a problem to be solved. If you had told me then that I'd be sitting in this chair and you'd be the one pouring the drinks." "I would have called you delusional," Alexander said, his hands sliding down my arms to my waist. He pulled me to my feet, turning me to face him. "But even then, Maya, even when I was trying to break you, a part of me knew. I knew you were the only thing in this world that could actually challenge me." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His eyes were dark, filled with a mixture of reverence and a heat that made my breath hitch. "I wanted to own you because I was afraid of you," he murmured. "I was afraid of how much I needed the fire you carry. I thought if I locked you in, I could control the burn. And now, I just want to be the one who keeps the fire going." He pulled me flush against him. The ivory wool of my suit was a thin barrier against the hard, demanding lines of his body. The rise wasn't just about the company. It was about the fact that we had finally found the balance. I had the power, and he had the heart. I reached up, my fingers tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck. "The board meeting is over, Alexander. The press conference isn't until tomorrow." "Is that a command, CEO Sterling?" He growled, his mouth hovering just an inch from mine. "It's a consultation," I breathed. He didn't wait for another word. He claimed my mouth with a ferocity that took my breath away. It wasn't the kiss of a boss or a protector. It was the kiss of a man who was finally, truly, in the presence of his equal. He lifted me onto the oak desk, the nameplate skittering across the wood. He moved between my legs, his hands sliding up my thighs, bunching the fabric of my skirt. The fire of Act II was nothing compared to this. The slow, deep, and absolute connection of two people who had survived the fallout and come out stronger. In the center of the tower that had once been my prison, I finally felt free. I was the one in control. I was the one who owned the room. And as Alexander growled my name against my throat, I realized that the greatest victory of my rise wasn't the title or the money. It was the man who was willing to kneel to ensure I never fell. Alexander POV. I watched her sleep on the sofa in her office. The sun had set, and the lights of Manhattan were beginning to twinkle like a billion diamonds. Maya looked peaceful, her head resting on a silk pillow, her ivory suit slightly wrinkled. She had worked for 18 hours straight before we finally found a moment of peace. I sat in the armchair across from her, a tablet in my lap. I was supposed to be reviewing the final liquidation of Vane's assets, but I couldn't stop looking at her. She had done it. She had taken the sterling mistake and turned it into a global legacy. She had faced the press, the board, and the ghosts of our fathers, and she hadn't blinked. I looked at the Vigil of Justice notebook on the table. I picked it up, and on the 20th page, I wrote a single sentence. She didn't just rise, she reclaimed the sky. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a private number. I walked out to the executive lobby before answering, not wanting to wake her. "Yes." "Alexander, it's Sarah Jenkins." I felt a ghost of the old tension return. "Sarah, I thought our business in London was concluded." "It is, but I thought you should know. Eris Thorne didn't just confess to the forgery. He gave the Swiss authorities a list of secondary contacts. People Arthur Blackwood worked with to secure the 1994 mapping. We already have the Mercer Group, Sarah. We're dismantling them." "It's not just the Mercers, Alexander. There was a firm in Tokyo. A firm that specialized in biological encryption. Eris says they've been monitoring the Horizon project for years. They think Maya's Factor 4 bridge is a violation of an old treaty." I felt a cold lurch in my gut. A treaty? What treaty? "The Icarus Protocol. Your father signed it in 1996. It wasn't in the files, Alexander. Arthur buried it because it effectively turned the mapping algorithm into a state secret. If this Tokyo firm moves against you, they won't use lawyers. They'll use the United Nations." The fallout wasn't over. The enemy was just changing shape. I looked through the glass door at Maya. She was still sleeping, oblivious to the new storm on the horizon. "Thank you, Sarah," I said, my voice turning back into the iron-hard tone of the man who owns the room. "Keep me updated." I hung up and walked back into the office. I didn't wake her. I sat on the edge of the sofa and watched her breathe. The rise was complete. She was the CEO. She was the Titan. But as the shadows of the night stretched across the floor, I realized that my job wasn't finished. I had promised to be the wall between her and the dark, and it looked like the dark was just getting started. Maya POV 2:00 a.m. I woke up to the sound of the city humming. The office was dark, save for the soft glow of the desk lamp. Alexander was sitting at the window, his silhouette sharp against the skyline. He looked like the man I had first met, the ruthless, solitary billionaire. But as he heard me move, he turned. The expression on his face was one of absolute, unshielded love. "You're awake," he said softly. "How long was I out?" "A few hours. You needed the rest, Maya. Tomorrow is the global launch." I sat up, smoothing my hair. "Is everything ready?" "Everything is perfect. Marcus has the final signatures. The servers are live." He walked over and sat beside me, taking my hand. "You did it, Maya. You saved the world." "We saved it, Alexander." He leaned in and kissed my forehead. "Go home, get some real sleep. I'll be right behind you." "Are you coming?" "In a minute. I just have one last thing to check with the Tokyo office." I looked at him, sensing a flicker of the old steward instinct. "Is something wrong?" "No," he lied, his voice as smooth as silk. "Just making sure the transition is seamless. Go. Russo is waiting at the elevator." I nodded, though a small seed of doubt planted itself in my mind. I walked to the door, but I stopped and looked back at him. He was back at the window, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. The rise was complete, but as I stepped into the elevator, I realized that in the world of Alexander Blackwood, a victory was just a prelude to the next battle. And this time, I wasn't going to let him fight it alone. Alexander POV. I watched the elevator doors close. I picked up the phone again. "Marcus, I want a full dossier on the Icarus protocol, and I want the contact for the Tokyo firm. Now." "Sir, Maya instructed us to keep the servers closed for the night." "Maya is the CEO," I said, my voice a low, lethal growl. "But I'm still the man who knows where the bodies are buried." "Do it, Marcus, before the sun comes up." The fallout was entering its final phase. Act III was almost over. Act IV was the claim, and I was going to make sure that when the world finally came for Maya Sterling, they found a Blackwood standing in their way. I looked at the Vigil of Justice notebook one last time. The scales were balanced. For now. But as the first light of dawn began to touch the skyline, I knew that the real war was just beginning. And this time, I was playing for keeps. Next chapter, Chapter 40, he loses everything.